Thank you, Naja. It was so powerful. It's the second time I've seen the film, and we're all so thrilled that you're here with us today. Good evening. I'm Neelam Chowdhary, the Vice President of New York Programs, and it is my pleasure today to lead the Q&A session for Naja. So I just want to get it kicked off and start by asking Naja, how did you begin this journey? What brought you to becoming involved in a great project like this?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier, Eddie Adams' photos, I grew up in some ways, or was traumatized quite a bit with the photo upon coming to America, because each year the photo was brought forth, mostly at PBS at the Fall of Saigon. And I really wanted to understand, of course, being a Vietnamese and a daughter of refugees, the story behind the photo. It actually started with just June, and it took months, by the way, to convince all these characters, because again, who wants to talk about one's pain, right? It's the last thing you want to do. It's like going to the dentist and more. And it took a lot of time to build trust. And it started with actually June, and we were just going to make the story about June. And then I got word from Vietnam that the children of Captain Lem were willing to talk, and so that opened up. And then lastly, I've actually have followed the Admiral since he became Admiral, because among the Vietnamese American community, there's tremendous pride in the Admiral becoming the first Vietnamese American Admiral in the US Navy. So I actually have followed, and friends have sent clippings and things saying, hey, this is a really interesting story. So I've actually have followed him through the years. And it took a lot of discussions, building trust, and he agreed. Yeah.
Amazing, and so glad that he did. So we're going to open up the Q&A, and I just want to let everyone know you must have received this postcard outside. There's a QR code, correct, where you all can go and share your thoughts, ask further questions, and you can also write something on this card itself and share it with Naja. So if we don't have enough time, I just want to encourage all of you and just to let you know that there is another space for questions and healing. So we already have a couple of questions up here. Go ahead.
There was a disclaimer on the screen very briefly about opinions don't reflect other opinions, and it was up so quickly, or maybe just because the film was so emotional, I couldn't read it or digest it. Could you give us information about that?
Sure. At the request of Luan and Tong, so when we were very upfront to the Vietnamese government, we did it, we asked for permission. It was really important for me that everything was open, and also for them too. And so when we interviewed them, the Ministry of Labor and Culture, I think they were there at every question, and they reviewed the questions before they were asked. And I think in the United States, we just assume that the words of the individuals are the words from the individuals. And I think for them, they just wanted to clarify that whatever words that were spoken by June and the Admiral is their words and not the children's words. And they wanted to be very clear about that as citizens of Vietnam.
Okay, next question. Okay. It's hard to see. The lights are pretty bright, so it's hard to see. Sorry.
Hi, Naja. I also come from a refugee family, so I'm very grateful for this story. You mentioned that you were intentional about not making this political. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the pains of war and the traumas of war are so, it takes generations to heal. And so, South Vietnam ceased to be South Vietnam in 1975 at the fall of Saigon. And a lot of them, not all of them, fled to the United States and became refugees and are now Vietnamese Americans. I think for those folks, right, it's been very difficult, I think, for that generation. Not only for the ARVNs, the South Vietnamese soldiers, because they came, I think, with tremendous pain and guilt that they lost the war, but also just like our US veterans, they never had support until much later in terms of PTSD, in terms of their own trauma. And so many are still dealing with their own traumas as I travel around the country and show this film. And it's one of the reasons why I am making this film, to really have all sides begin to move towards healing. I think intellectually, everyone knows, there's U.S.-Vietnam reconciliation, and they all, I think each of these characters are moving towards that. But you can see the pains, right? And the pains of wars. We still see each other, where are you from? What side are you on? Who were your parents? And I can speak for my parents as a Vietnamese American. They were refugees. And I think just very similar to the Holocaust, they came here with tremendous trauma, and they also were just trying to survive for their own family and making a living. And it's really this generation that is really telling the stories and the authentic stories of their pains. I think on both sides, not just the Vietnamese side, but also those who are in Vietnam. And it's been a real honor for me to travel around the country. I hear stories from Vietnam vets who are in their 80s. One man was patrolling, and it talks about the insanity of war. He's patrolling on ground, and his buddy had no idea he was down there. So his buddy was in the plane dropping Agent Orange. And so this 87-year-old man has had 3 forms of cancer and 7 operations. I have met with Vietnamese Americans my parents' age who fought in the Vietnam War for South Vietnam. And I just remember one man just crying as he's saying, this film is just not enough for South Vietnam. This is not enough. And he just started crying. And then I met someone from Morgan Stanley recently, and her grandfather fought, she's from Hanoi, and her grandfather fought in Saigon, which is now Ho Chi Minh City. And he lost his leg, he never talked about the war, and she's crying after the film, and she's saying, I wish I had asked him questions. So you can still feel and see the pains on all sides.
We have a couple of questions on this side.
Thank you for taking on a difficult subject matter in conversations. I am very curious, though, whether or not you had considered putting the 2 daughters together, or you don't think the subjects are ready for that kind of reconciliation or conversation?
That's a really thoughtful question, because you're right, the daughters have so much similarities in terms of their dads, right? Both dads entered the forces, one for the Viet Cong, one for the South Vietnam when they were in their teens, right, 12 years old. And you can feel the pains, and we wanted to show that pain. Just even with Luan, of course, she knows that the Tet Offensive was the Viet Cong, but as a daughter, it's like, my dad couldn't have done that. That's not who my dad is in my heart and in my mind. And we wanted to show that. I don't think they're ready. Right? I think they intellectually, they're moving on, but I think emotionally, they're still grappling. You have to understand that these are refugees. They didn't have the advantages of even processing their own grief with therapists. And in some ways, this film allows that space. You're seeing this in real time of how they're processing their pains, right? They wouldn't have met one another or even want to sit down and talk about this, but the film allows that space for storytelling and for the processing and for the moving towards healing to happen.
Edie, over here.
Can we? Oh, sorry. I see Edith up there.
I mean, Edie, you can ask.
Go ahead. Hi, friend. Nice to see
Hi,
you.
Naja. Thank you so much for sharing this with the world. I'm sitting here, and there's something about intergenerational trauma. Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment because I remember growing up. So I'm a political refugee like Naja, coming over in '75. My father was an Air Force officer for the South. And growing up there were so few opportunities to learn about the Vietnam War. And when you did, these pictures keep cropping up. So in my mind, Hollywood portrayed South Vietnamese as villains, or as corrupt, incompetent. And I knew the community that I grew up in was anything but that. It was a community of political refugees who served the Republic of Vietnam, right? So they were really honorable people. And so I kept pressing my father over the years, Dad, how can you explain this picture? How can you, just tell me about this picture? And he just did not talk. And it wasn't until the fall of Kabul that he started opening up, and he called me. And in tears, he told me the story. He's a friend of General Tuong, who was beheaded. And he was also a friend of Commander Luang, who pulled the trigger. And he told me about the story, about the massacre. And he said, no one knows about this. Mainstream, your generation doesn't understand the backstory. And, sure enough, I did my doctorate. And the literature of Vietnam War has so few representation from the South. And I felt that reconciliation wouldn't really happen in the truest sense without providing more agency for this group. And so I really thank you for this film and giving us an opportunity to reflect and share and open these conversations that are important for the next generation. And so my question is about how, well, I think you've already answered it, but how this can or has been received by the Vietnamese community in America and abroad, the diaspora. So I just wanted to share that.
It's been really amazing traveling around the country. And one of the most meaningful for me was the screening in Newport Beach. It was a 500-seat in this beautiful theater in Newport Beach. And 500 people came, they signed up, and 150 were still on the wait list. And they stood there waiting in line, some of them in their 80s. And it was really hard for me to say, there's no space, right? And I was also really scared because 90% of the population at that screening was Vietnamese, and a lot were ARVNs, South Vietnamese soldiers. And we had the screening, and I could hear, people were crying all throughout. And Q&A lasted for over an hour, in which people just wanted to just share. They were crying. I fought my best. I did my best. And I think they felt proud that we were able to even address their pains, our parents' pains, for the first time in a story, in a movie. I don't think I, in my heart, as an American, do not feel that we give enough to our veterans, whether they're U.S. veterans or our allies. I think we can do more.
Sorry. Can I just wanted to share what my father said about that photo. He said that when the directive came out that the family was massacred that morning, the South was just the emotions ran high. Mm-hmm. And he said that there was an expectation from Commander Long to pull that trigger Otherwise, he would lose credibility with all the people who were looking to him. I think they were just, he said it wasn't an excuse, but it was just how the tragedy of war, because in the moment it was, emotions ran high.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I wanted to add that.
It was the second day of the Tet Offensive. And so for sure, I just want to take 1 minute because it's a really special, emotional day for me too, because we've been working on this film. And it's, you know, I've worked on as an executive producer maybe 10, definitely over 10. But this has been the most emotional journey for me as a Vietnamese American. But today is a very special night for me because Admiral Huan's family, his cousins, his aunt, who I've heard so much about this past year, they're all here today. So can I just ask them to just stand and just be recognized? They're in the front row. I think everyone. So they're waving right here.
Okay.
I'm just really proud as a daughter of Vietnamese refugees to be telling this story. And so we're going on this journey of healing. I think it's time after 50 years that we continue this journey for all of us as children of war to move beyond the war. Edie. Excuse me. So Edie, by the way, knew Eddie Adams and is one of the few Vietnamese, women during the Vietnam War in the AP office. So I'm so proud, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Naja. A couple of follow-up questions. First, I'm sure everybody would like to know whether this documentary has been entered in any of the major film festivals and whether it is eligible for an Oscar. Secondly, has Eddie Adams' surviving family seen it, and what was their reaction to it? And thirdly, has this experience inspired you for your next project, whatever it is? Thank you.
So yes, so Eddie Adams' family, Alyssa, his wife, has become a dear friend. She and her family have been tremendously helpful in terms of this project, in terms of this journey. Unfortunately, she can't be here tonight. She really wanted to be here tonight, but unfortunately, the Eddie Adams workshop begins tonight, and so which is in upstate New York, and that's Eddie's legacy. And so she is jammed. And we spoke today, and she just wished me luck. And they loved the movie. They thought that Eddie would have been really proud. Eddie Adams became Eddie Adams with this photo, of course. You know that more than I do. And every time he goes to an exhibition, the first question is about this photo because it's a powerful photo. It defines the Vietnam War. And Eddie actually, and I did not know this until Alyssa told me, has asked that they don't bring up the photo during his last years. And, I was really happy to know from the family that they not only did they embrace the film, but they really thought that Eddie would have loved the film. That really resonated with me. In terms of the film, we have won numerous awards from Best Documentary to also Best Female Director for a short film in the United States. And we also won Best Short Documentary in New Zealand. And we do qualify for Oscar nominations. So thank you. Oh, one is about Vietnam, and I'm going to keep it a little quiet for now because I'm still doing the research and talking to the families involved. It's not about any other photos. And the other one I've been asked is to tell a story about, I'm not sure if you know, the cowboy poetry. Does anybody know? You have to live in the West to know, but you do. Yeah, so yeah, it's a big deal in places like Idaho, Colorado, Utah, where I'm from. And it's once a year, real cowboys get together and they tell their stories and their poetry. It's been happening for over 100 years. And I'm starting to like that because I want to tell what does it mean to be an American, and the visuals behind that and the words behind that intrigues me. So we'll see.
Questions over
Stan?
here. And Lulu as well.
Thanks for doing this. Not just a wonderful evening. Could you tell us a little bit about the program that you established at Columbia for Vietnam people and the fantastic success that they've had in the States as immigrants here?
Oh, you were there. That's right, with Chin Chu. You were there at that dinner. You know, I've been so busy with this project film that I haven't really come back in a lot of ways and did further. But I think what you're talking about is I brought a dialogue at Columbia University on Vietnamese Americans and how we have given back to our adopted land, the United States of America. And I brought a person who you know very well because as Allen and Company, you interacted with Blackstone. And so Chin Chu is the first Vietnamese American to have been, is he here tonight? He was supposed to be here. Okay. And he became a partner of the Blackstone Group, which is a big, very successful private equity. And I think with that, Columbia has continued to invite other Vietnamese Americans to show how they have given back to this land. Thank you for asking.
Lulu, go ahead.
Naja, thank you so much for sharing your film with us. And given all the pain that we've seen tonight, I wonder if there's something good that can come of that. And I was thinking of two things. One, if it wasn't clear to any of us in the world, war is bad. No one wins in war. There's pain all around. And it's not short-term pain, it's enduring pain. So hopefully this will slow down any movement toward war. Two, and there's plenty of war right now in the world, but two, is there any hope that having learned from how healing can come about, even after the most incredible atrocities, is there a way that we can bring healing to those who are now suffering from the effects of war as peace ensues in their countries?
Yeah, you know, we've been having an impact campaign in which we are going and screening the film this year, and we're talking to students. We're talking to high school kids who are refugees, and they're crying. Kids from Afghanistan have come up and really connected to this. And I think I'm hoping that it's not just the healing for Vietnamese Americans, Lulu, but other current refugees who have been displaced by war. And again, it takes generations, as you know, to move beyond the pains of war and the horrors of war. But we're starting with this film. And I feel tremendous meaning with that, Lulu. So thank you.
Thank you.
Over here? Yep. And then I think one back there as well.
This one right here.
Right here.
I just wanted to thank you for making such a gorgeous film, and as another Asian American filmmaker, being such a shining and inspiring inspiration of why we make movies, why we tell stories, and why it's so important for us to do so. I had a couple of, one's a comment and one's a question. I thank you for making such a bold choice of showing such a shattering photo over and over and over again. And as a producer, it's when you're watching it, you're thinking, oh my God, again, again, again. But as the film goes on, you realize there's such layered meaning. And every time you see the photo, there's another dimension that you're revealing. And I just thought, what a stunning and bold and beautiful choice as a filmmaker to do that. And my question is, how did you approach the subjects? How much relationship did you have with them before the shoot? And how did you prep them for giving you such emotional and authentic dialogue and conversations? Because obviously you're broaching a topic that's so emotionally charged, and yet they were so open and willing with you. And I just wondered what that relationship was like prior to the cameras rolling.
You know, we brought on at the very beginning one of the top American psychologists on childhood trauma and PTSD. And I think it made all the difference in terms of where the setting was. We chose, especially for Admiral Juan, we chose a place that was connected to nature. And I think we spent double the budget because we shot when he wanted to shoot. You know, I think it would have been very different if we were sitting at a CNN where 5 different cameras are on him and lighting. I think that would have been very hard. And at times, we only shot maybe for 45 minutes because it was just too much. And we stopped filming and we said, let's just go for a walk. And so he and I went for a lot of walks and just quiet time. And then we shot the next day. So that's how we approached it. And for June, it was her kitchen. That was where, you have to remember, this woman, from the time she came at 14, all the way up until she went to college, and sometimes even during college she came back, lived in the kitchen. But the kitchen for her brought back a lot of family memories, but it also was a place where she raised her kids, right? And she cooked for them. And so that was really important, and she felt really comfortable. For the 2 children of the Viet Cong, Captain Lam, their mother was illiterate. They didn't even have schooling until the fall of 1975, and the government then gave them free education, and they are just tremendous hard workers. They just work, and they're just so proud of where they are as middle-class citizens, and so their home, they were so proud to be filmed in their home, which represented the success and the mobility that they have as current citizens of Vietnam. And so we chose to film places that people are most comfortable with.
The ask?
Yeah, for sure. So June's family have never granted an interview since they arrived in America in 1975. This was the first. It took me months to talk to them and to really establish trust between June and I. For the 2 children, the VCs, they've given numerous interviews. For them, it was very important that the government of Vietnam approved and agreed. And so once we did that and got the support, they were willing to talk. I think the hardest subject, as you can see from the film, was Admiral Juan. He's such a private person. He's such a decent person, and with such tremendous integrity. And the last thing he wanted to do was talk about this. He said, no. And I called him, we talked, I even showed up. He said, I'll think about it. And that's like a Vietnamese way of saying no. and then I came back again, and it was a journey. I said, I need for you to take this leap with me. I think those were my exact words. I said, I need for you to take this leap with me. It's not just about you, it's about a whole generation of people who are still in pain, as you said it so well. And so he agreed. And I'm so grateful for that.
We have a couple of questions all the way in the back. They've been waiting for a bit.
Thank you so much. First, what an amazing film. When you were talking about different kinds of pains, you mentioned the Holocaust, and my family is refugees from the Holocaust, and there's something incredibly familiar when I was watching this in terms of talking about my grandfather was 80 when he started talking about it. They didn't talk about it growing up. That became the next generation to understand. So I just want to say thank you, and I felt the film spoke to a lot of universal truths, a lot of, memories. My question is, how do you keep I'm a filmmaker as well, and how do you keep your objectivity when it's something you're so dearly connected to? How do you know where to cut yourself off and pace yourself, but at the same time?
I had an amazing team. You know, I worked exactly 10 years ago on the 40th anniversary with, now she has become a dear friend, Rory Kennedy, on Last Days in Vietnam, which qualified for the Oscars also and shortlisted for the Oscar. And so two of her team members came on to this project because it is my first directorial debut. I've been a producer and an executive producer for the past 12, 14 years, but this is my first directorial debut. And they were like, you know, I know you care for all these characters, and we had weekly meetings, and they constantly pushed back, you know, when on every single frame, I think we talked about, in which, you know, it has to be, you know, and they kept me objective, because you're absolutely right, it's very hard. When the Admiral says, you know what, I don't know, maybe you should just like cut like halfway through. He's like, you know, I don't know, maybe you should just not bring my subject. I don't think it adds to the film. And so my team's like, okay, well, let's process that and let us think about it. Right.
Good evening. My name is Lippy Roy. I'm an addiction medicine physician. I'd say 90% of my patients have a history of childhood trauma. I firmly believe that the combination of storytelling and science is the way to move the needle forward when it comes to these universal tragic, traumatic experiences. My question for you, first of all, just brilliant storytelling from such an empathic lens. So thank you for that. My question for you was, did the participants, the family members, describe to you what their healing journey was, like how they got from like the age of 9 or 14 to where they are now as what seems like fairly functional adults? That healing journey, whether it be therapy, medications, I'm not sure, but if they shared any of that with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so June called me after, maybe 2 weeks after our interviews, and she said, I've been crying every day, and it's been painful, but I'm really proud and I'm healing. So that was nice to hear. I think they're all processing in their own time, and they're on very different journeys. The Admiral is, how do I say this? Admiral Huan is a, to even say the word remarkable is an understatement. Because here's this boy, right, who has seen at the age of 9 his family massacred. And then he is adopted by his uncle and aunt and comes. And where does he come? He comes to Oklahoma in 1975. How worse, right, in some ways. And so he comes empty-handed, learns the language, and is a refugee with his aunt and uncle and their children. And what does he do? He becomes an admiral. An admiral is the protector of our country, and he chooses to be the protector of his adopted country. I think for Admiral Juan, I mean, you can't, I mean, to talk about what does it mean to be an American, I mean, you just look at the Admiral and you see that. But also, I think for the Admiral, he gets meaning by doing good work, for helping people. I think that's how he copes with his pain, that he wakes up every day. And he's told me that too, that it helps him heal when he does good work.
Thank you.
Hi, Naja. Up here.
Ooh.
Hi.
Yes.
I was just curious. I know your family is.
Hello, AP Associated Press.
Hello. I know your family is aware, and you've made sure that they're aware of the rich tapestry of their lives. But did this spark any new conversations with the next generation beyond? Because the children of the children are very aware of what their parents are going through and are curious, as we saw with Joan's family. Has this brought anything new up with you and your daughters and your son?
Oh, yes. They've all seen the film. And I think they understand their mother better. You know, I used to be so proud before making this film. I used to be so proud. So, you know, I have no trauma. I'm a success story, right? And in the United States. And my kids would look at me and they would look at their dad, almost like, should we tell her that that's not true? And I've become, and I understand some of the quirks and some of the pains that I've been dealing with personally. So as a family, I think we're closer and we're able to talk about that.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Naja, can you see anyone in the audience?
I see Tao,
You
and then
select.
next to Tao.
Okay.
Yeah, go.
Hi, Naja. I just want to thank you for bringing the film, to broader awareness so we can understand what we've all been through. My question is that, how do you pick the subject? How do you find the story and connect it and bring it to life to tell the story? That's an amazing journey you go through. I want to know, how do you start with that?
Yeah, and in some ways, I think it's destiny, right? That the universe just came through. I first met June, and I thought the film was just going to be about General Lon, and then the showing of the VC. We had people in Vietnam asking them, and they said they would agree if the government agreed, and then we thought that would be just fine because that's the photo, right? And then, I had always, for years, as soon as he became Admiral, I got, oh my goodness, maybe 50 emails saying, did you know about this? Did you know about this? And so that was always in the back of my mind. And also my dad was USAID intelligence, as well as a professor in Vietnam. So I actually knew about that 9-year-old boy. And in some ways, I grew up just always thinking of that 9-year-old boy. And even though he's in his 60s, I still think of him as this 9-year-old boy. And so that for me was kind of the connector. It's like that really will show all sides. But it took probably just as much time to film as it was to convince all those individuals to agree to interview.
How long did it take you to put the film together?
It was pretty quick. I mean, for filmmaking, as all of the filmmakers who are here, it took me 4 or 5 months maybe to just talk to the individuals. And then we started filming probably around June, right? June of 2024. Yeah.
That is quick, yes.
So it was pretty fast.
Okay, we're going to take one more question. Naja, if you can select someone. I know you can maybe see a little.
Oh, I don't know.
Somebody all the way in the
Whose hands have you
back?
seen so often? Maybe
quite
we
a
can just
few.
do really quickly too, because his.
Yeah, Magalang
Yes, if you can make it quick.
Handing
Oh,
up.
have you seen her? Okay, so we'll
then-
start over here and then we'll go back
Yeah,
over there.
So why don't you
And
start?
if you can make
there.
them,
Yep.
Hi, thank you so much. I was a photo editor after the Vietnam War, and I knew Eddie Adams a bit, and this really just brings so much dimensions and just honors all photojournalists and journalists, as well as all who have suffered in these conflicts. And my question is, has this film been screened at the United Nations? And might it be? Thank
We
you.
would love to have it screened at the United Nations. So if you know of anyone, let us know. Go ahead. Thank you.
I was wondering, did the Vietnamese government give you any feedback from the film? Is it allowed to be screened in Vietnam? And would they take any issue with any portrayals?
So we had tremendous support from the U.S. Ambassador, Mark Napper. He actually even hosted a wonderful reception for us last year when I came to film. And it was really, he was so supportive of this story. And then when we came, the regular procedures, I had maybe 15 pages of questions, and the next day, some were darkened and some were not, in terms of how, in terms of my questions. And I think also in Vietnam, at least the Vietnamese nationals who are in the United States who have seen it, have been really very much like the Vietnamese Americans. They really have embraced it. So I'm really delighted about that. I am flying in next week to Dartmouth from San Francisco, Boston, and then Boston, I'm going to drive 2.5 hours to my son's college at Dartmouth. And the reason I'm screening at Dartmouth, because one of the top Vietnamese professor, Ed Miller, on modern contemporary Vietnamese studies is there. And he's bringing Fulbright, FUV, the Fulbright School college in Vietnam, is the university in Vietnam, some of the students there. So they're actually going to be screening, they're going to be there. And so I'm excited for that, for them to see this and to really, as Lulu says, have the healing continue on all sides.
There's one question. I think you had your hand up a lot. Was it? I think yes. We'll bring the mic to you.
I just wanted to ask a question about screen time. It seems like you meaningfully had both families represented in terms of screen time. I'm wondering if there was a creative. What was the intentionality behind that?
Screen time.
Yeah, I know.
Our team talked quite a bit about that because, when you ask each, well, really, we screen to each of the characters. And it was funny because Loan and Tong says, why do they have double the screening time and we don't? And then June's family, when they screened it together, was like, why do they get double the screen time and we don't? And I had to say, well, they're all somewhat the same screening in terms of the time they had, right? And so again, I think that tells so much about the emotions that are still happening, even after 50 years on all sides.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you
Naja,
again.
thank you.
Thank you, Asia Society, and thank you, Lulu and Stan. Thank you.
And please do come back with your next project. We would love to have you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.